Hello, 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 and welcome back to the Secular Homeschool Revolution podcast. This is a space for progressive secular homeschoolers who are unapologetically questioning the systems that we were taught and reimagining what home education and parenting looks like in a way that centers our kids. I am your host, Ashley. If you are new here, a little bit about me is I've been homeschooling for a while. I have 3 kids, 13, 9, and 5. I'm also a homeschooling cooperative co-founder. Our organization is just amazing. It is a secular, diverse, inclusive community that focuses on decolonized education. And I get to add the co-founder of a micro school title to my name as well, because we branched out and opened a micro school as an extension to our homeschooling cooperative. So I truly believe in alternative education. I believe kids should find their just right model to learn. And I'm also a justice-centered person. So I try to tie that into my own homeschooling, journey with my kids as well as with this podcast. So it's nice to meet you, and I'm glad you're here. Okay, so after last week's episode, I did realize that I was throwing out like the term mastery-based learning or learning to mastery without deeply explaining what that is. So that is going to be our focus on today's episode. Okay, so first I want you to take a breath, because I don't want you to feel like, oh, great, here's one other thing I'm supposed to be doing, or here's another thing I have to add to the list. I just relax, take a deep breath, release the tension in your shoulders. It's all good, because you're probably already doing this. Mastery-based learning just means your kid moves forward when they actually understand something. And, you don't move forward because it's Friday, or because the lesson plan says week 6, or because, you created a schedule, or like you planned backwards on where you wanted to like start and finish, right? No, we're not doing that, because if we're doing the mastery-based learning approach, we move on when they understand it. That's it. And I feel like some support I can offer you is, if you've ever slowed down because your kid didn't get it, or if you've ever said, let's try this again tomorrow, or if you've ever pulled out like YouTube or alternative resource, or just changed curriculum altogether because it just wasn't clicking, the math wasn't mathing, you were practicing mastery and you just didn't know the term, you just didn't know how to name it. But ultimately, you were responding to the need of your kid. And in traditional schools, they move on based on time. Like the district requires X amount of the content to be complete by a certain date, right? And they're not requiring that a certain percentage gets the content at mastery. They just want you to move along as, quickly and as fast as you can. And in homeschooling, that's the beautiful part. We get flexibility, because mastery-based learning, just puts language to something that a lot of us intuitively already have been doing and feeling. And we're understanding that the education matters more than speed. And this isn't about mastering the content to perfection. It's, we just want them to have solid comprehension, enough that they can explain it back, they can use it, they can apply it. And it's about confidence being built, because if they understand the concept, then they're going to have confidence not only in themselves, but in the content. So if you've, ever worried that you're quote unquote behind, or that you're taking, too long on a concept, you might not be behind at all. You just are honoring mastery. And that's not falling short. My friend, what you are doing is intentional homeschooling. You're intentionally homeschooling. Like, you're putting true intention behind it, as well as parenting, because you are connecting and seeing where your kid is at and honoring learning at their pace at that moment. So what does mastery look like in real life? So let's bring it out of the theory land and let's talk about it. So mastery-based learning sounds real like educationally, real conferencey, like pedagogy does for me. But what does this actually look like on a random Tuesday at the kitchen table in your house? So math first, because math is where most of us, I feel like, we spiral. And we can use fractions. Yeah, we can use fractions as an example. So they can circle the right answer on a worksheet, but when you ask them why 1/4 is bigger than 1/8, they might freeze, or they might hesitate, or they might stutter, right? But they're not ultimately able to really explain it. Mastery-based learning says that's an indication that we should pause. We're not going to panic. No, we're not behind. No, I guess, we're not going to label them and say, oh, you're just not mathy. They just might be stuck on one concept, and that's okay. So, you might need to pull out some manipulatives. You might need to look at some other resources to see if they can explain it in a different way. Or you just might need to switch your approach completely. You don't move to decimals just because the curriculum says you should be on lesson 47 next. You stay until it clicks. That's mastery. So for example, with distributive properties. And so what I did was, okay, she was struggling. We went through the lesson again, and then it just was not happening. And so I went and looked for an alternative resource. It still wasn't clicking. So I went and looked at a grade below to see if she could at least have that foundational skill. And she was. So then I was like, okay, let's, after she got her confidence back up and we practiced it, then I brought her to her grade level, and it seemed to work. Like, going back and revisiting a grade below lesson helped her click for the grade level when she went back, and she was able to, ace the objective that she was working on. So for reading, it's the same thing. So your kid can read fluently out loud, right? It sounds smooth and confident and impressive. But when you ask, like, what was the chapter about? And they shrug at you, that's not mastery. So instead of pushing forward into harder books because the reading level chart says so, that's an indicator that you should slow down and build comprehension. Talk about it, even act it out, ask open-ended questions, try to connect it to life. That's going to help with mastery. What does it look like in history? Well, if your kid can memorize dates but can't explain power and perspective or whose voices are missing, then they're practicing memorization, not mastery. So this is, I'm going to encourage you to take this as a moment to realize you need to ask deeper questions. You should compare sources. You need to connect it to what's happening now or other historical events, because that's going to build the mastery. And the important part is mastery does not mean perfection. It just means that they have a solid understanding of the concept. It means your kid can use the information without you standing right there next to them, coaching them through every single thing. It also means sometimes you just might have to loop back. And looping back is not failure. Looping back is strengthening the foundation. And that's okay. Sometimes you just got to do a little revisit. And this is why mastery-based learning feels so different from traditional pacing, because instead of racing through everything and patching holes later, you're building it strong the first time around. And yeah, it's going to take longer, but longer isn't worse. Longer is not, terrible. Longer just means you're going deeper, and deeper seems to last longer. And this is what this looks like in real life. It isn't fancy. It's not fun. It's not even complicated. It's just being responsive. It just means you're offering an intentional learning environment. So here's where this gets really powerful for us as homeschoolers. We actually have the freedom. You have the freedom to teach them to mastery. Traditional schools, traditional brick and mortars are tied to pacing guides, district calendars, standardized testing, curriculum maps, scope and sequences, and they'll say something like Unit 3 must be completed by October 14th. And teachers don't always get to slow down, even if they know the kids need it. But you can offer that to them. And I think that's such a beautiful way to honor their education. You can take 2 weeks on long division just to make sure it's, hammered in. You can spend an entire month deep diving into like the ancient Mali because your kid is just obsessed. You can pause everything because something is emotionally heavy and happening in the world, and your kid needs space to process it. Mastery-based learning works in homeschooling because flexibility is built in. And this is so important because freedom also comes with responsibility. Because when you're not being pushed by a system, you have to decide what mastery actually looks like in your home. You have to ask. It's your responsibility to ask yourself, what does understanding mean for us? What are our standards here in this family on our homeschooling journey? What are we building towards? This isn't a do whatever or have no expectations. This is really honing in on the intentional part of homeschooling. And when we're committing to this like mastery-based learning style, we're saying we are not rushing, but we are serious about our education. And I also, I want to speak to the parents who worry about being behind. Behind who? Behind a system that is graduating adults at a 6th grade reading level. We have a literacy crisis in this country. So who are you exactly behind? Because the system as it stands moves 25 kids at the same speed, whether they're ready or not. Behind is arbitrary, right? Because we're comparing it to grade level charts. And what are we behind? Standardized benchmarks that were never designed with your individual kid in mind? Mastery-based homeschooling shifts the whole timeline. And you got to be flexible, because when you're flexible, you're also understanding that growth is not linear. It says kids develop in an uneven, unpredictable, beautiful way. It says that depth in the content matters more than the speed. And especially for neurodivergent kids, for kids who need more processing time, for kids who get hyper-focused and like to take deep dives, because instead of labeling them behind, you're saying, we move when you understand. And that changes the whole homeschooling narrative. It even, I feel like, changes a child's internal narrative. It moves them from, I'm not good at this, to, I'm still learning this. And that's the language you need to be mindful of. Oh, you suck at fractions, or hey, you're terrible at fractions, or you're failing at fractions. That is not the language we want to use. We want to empower them to say, you know what? I'm not good at this yet. I'm still learning this now. And that in itself is power. Mastery-based learning, again, is not removing the rigor. It removes artificial pressure. And those are not the same thing. Now, we have to talk about the elephant in the room in the Facebook groups, because you're probably thinking or processing or taking notes around, what about accountability? What about transcripts? What about college? What about rigor? First of all, mastery-based learning is not lazy parenting. It is not lazy homeschooling. It's actually harder. It is way easier to slap a grade on something and just move on. It's easier to say, oh, you got an 82, good enough. Mastery asks, do you actually understand this? And this is also my issue with like a lot of the online platforms. And I know this is off topic a little bit on the soapbox, but a lot of the online platforms, especially if they're on computers and stuff, they learn the systems. My kid learned Time for Learning. She learned Mia Academy, and the software in itself wasn't asking deeper level thinking. So I do think for homeschooling, for like a gentle start, I encourage the all-in-one software. And then once you start getting a rhythm, slowly start, take history. And then a month later, you'll be responsible. You found a curriculum for language arts. And so I think you should peel back on it. But if it's a place to start, it's a place to start. But the online software doesn't give that deeper level. It doesn't check for that deeper level of understanding. It solely relies on the good enough grades. And again, this is intentional because we're having to pay more attention. We're giving more observation. We're giving more engagement, more presence. So we need to kill the myth right now that mastery-based learning is soft. And it is not soft. It is thorough. Because we are thoroughbreds over here. I don't know why that popped in my head. So let's have a quick chat about the obsession with grades. So some of us are still operating from our own academic trauma from, graduating from the said system where we were praised for A's. We were, judged for C's, and we internalize that as our worth. And now we are starting to recreate that same pressure at home. And that gold star culture is deep. But that's why, you guys, also, you should really, really look into, when you're starting homeschooling, into the, de-schooling process. Not to be confused with unschooling, but the de-schooling process, because that is acknowledging that you're a product of the system and you have work to break through so that you're not recreating the system at home. You're not trying to recreate public school at home. Again, mastery-based learning is, are we raising point collectors or are we raising critical thinkers? Because colleges don't want just kids who can bubble in things correctly. They want students who can write and analyze, problem solve, communicate, because that can show mastery. And again, transcripts, you can still document mastery. I talked about it on the last episode. There's alternatives to like a traditional transcript that colleges and universities are accepting, And if your kid cannot explain a concept without a worksheet in front of them, that doesn't mean what you think it means. If they can't apply it outside of the exact format that they practiced it in, that's not rigor. They're performing. That's rehearsal. And mastery is when they can use it without you, without the worksheet, without it being directly in front of them. And when they can teach it back, when they can argue their point, when they can solve something new, that's the bar. And yes, it does take longer sometimes, and we're not running an academic race, right? We're raising humans who need to function in a world that's really complex. So if mastery, guys, means you're going to slow down, then slow down. If mastery means revisiting something instead of pretending it counts because you finished the chapter or because you have a timeline you want to meet, go revisit the content. And understand, accountability is great, but it isn't about the pressure. It is about the clarity, that there's clear standards, clear understanding, there's clear growth. And that's the kind of accountability we need. And that in itself is stronger and better than any gold star A++++ system. If this episode did anything, I hope it gave you exhale energy, because mastery-based learning is not another thing to add to your plate. I wanted to offer you permission. I wanted to give you permission to slow down. I wanted to give you permission to stop racing and feeling like you got to compete against these invisible timelines. Permission to care more about understanding the topics. You should not be replicating school at home. Don't have a panic because someone else's 9-year-old is quote unquote ahead of yours. Stop the comparison. Comparison is a joy stealer. You are not raising a transcript. You are raising a human being. And when the focus shifts from did we finish the curriculum to did you actually understand this, the whole entire tone of your homeschooling is going to change. You're going to feel less pressure. You're going to feel calmer. It's going to get deeper. And most importantly, it gets more honest. And that is revolutionary. If this episode made something click for you, please share it, text it to a homeschool friend, post it in your co-op or a homeschooling group. The algorithm is not going to push conversations like this. We do. So come hang out with me on my social media on Secular Homeschool Revolution on most platforms. I'm always in the comments, always thinking out loud. I'm trying to get better at posting. If you want to support the podcast and keep it, help me keep it alive and well, you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com, Secular HS School Revolution. I have the link in my show description. And if this space has supported you in any way, the biggest thing you can do for me is share it, leave a review, comment, and that's how we're going to grow this movement. We are not just homeschooling, we are reimagining education, and that matters. So stay questioning, stay building, and as always, stay revolutionary.